All right, let's go. I hope you like my hair. I am ready. It's time for the recap. All the books I read this year. This year, I read a lot of books. First off, poetry. This is Polvo de Huesos by, it's an anthology of Rosabeti Muñoz's poems. This book was recommended to me by a friend who's a poet. But the funny thing is, I opened this book, I read one poem, and it was so good that I just blindly bought it. And then after I bought it and I read the whole book, it's actually the only poem that I really like. The book is not bad, it's okay, but it's not the kind of poetry that I really dig. So it's okay. It's Juan Rodriguez's poems. It's Poesía by Juan Rodriguez, also in Spanish, of course, as you can tell. And it has some very nice moments too. Juan Rodriguez, if you don't know him, he's a playwright. He's a Chilean playwright. He's great. He died a few years ago, 2017, I guess. But this anthology is very nice. It's all the poems that he wrote. He was mainly a playwright, so he only has a few poems, but the ones over here are very nice. It's so simple. Rodriguez, he was like that. He was a man that would write in very deep poetry, but anchor in such a simplicity that you will think, oh, I could write that. Yeah, but you didn't. Like Rodriguez did it, and he did it in such a beautiful way. This is a little delicate book. It's not long at all. It's 60 pages, it's all in Spanish, of course. I don't think there's a translation. But if you read Spanish or you're looking for a book of Juan Rodriguez that it's not his place, this is a very good one. Yanko Gonzalez is probably my favorite Chilean poet, or one of my favorite Chilean poets. He has such a nice cadence, and he tells stories that seem to lead nowhere, and then right at the end they take a switch and they take you to such nice places. If you can read Spanish and you're looking for a nice book of poetry, I mean, this was my favorite this year. It has some elements from other books that I really like. So it's Objetivo General it's a collection of poems of books by Yanko Gonzalez. He has excerpts from Metales Pesados, which is a book that I already recommended a few years ago and I really like. It has many different bits and pieces from other ones. Alto Volta, where's the other one? It was El Abuga. Anyway, it's very nice. It has such nice moments, and it seems like it's going in one direction and then it switches and goes in another one, and it hits you like by surprise. It's such a nice book. I really like Yanko Gonzalez. If you're looking for an introduction to Yanko Gonzalez's poems, Objetivo General might be the best one. I always recommend Metales Pesados, which is my favorite by Yanko Gonzalez, but this is pretty good. So there you go. And besides, you can get bits and pieces of Metales Pesados in this one, so win-win, I guess. Mystical philosophy more than anything, or like spiritual readings of sorts. After some experiences in my life that at some point I'll go in detail on this channel, I decided to get into more spiritual readings. And by spiritual, I mean spiritual in the sense that they have to do with awareness or consciousness or the development of self-consciousness. So, of course, I got into Buddhism. And I found two very cool books. One, I'm going to start with the most known one, the Tibetan Book of the Dead. So this book, it was such a shock when I read it, because I've had some very deep spiritual experiences, spiritual near-death experiences, and this book really tells you how it is. I've read online some people who have read it and then commented like, oh, it's a very nice book, but it's telling a story, and it's all like, of course, it's all made up and whatnot. And it's weird to hear people saying it's all made up, because when you have like deep spiritual or near-death experiences, there's no doubt that this is what it is. This is it. Like I'm sorry to tell you, but from my experience, your mileage may vary, but this is it, bro. And it's low-key terrifying, but at the same time, it's very comforting. So the Tibetan Book of the Dead. If you have never read this book, do yourself a favor and read it. If you ever had any kind of near-death experience, or a deep psychedelic experience, or any kind of spiritual awakening, probably this will make a lot of sense to you, because it did make a lot of sense to me. It's a beautiful book, highly recommended. If you have never read it and you have no idea what it is about, it's a book about the process that consciousness experiences when you die. So it's told from the perspective of someone taking care of a dead body. So when somebody dies in the Tibetan tradition, you go and you sing and you read this long text to their ears, so the dead body can, the consciousness that's still in the dead body can hear you and then take the journey into the world of the dead, the other dimension, or the bardo, which is actually what it is. It's this other state of consciousness, which is actually not a state of consciousness. It's just the retraction or the condensation or whatever metaphor you want to use for consciousness to get in a less solid state, in a more subtle state, I would say, or subtle mode. It's beautiful, really beautiful. Highly recommend it, really good. From here, since I was already into, Zen Buddhism and all that, I got this one, The Myth of Freedom, which basically goes through what the hell is up with Zen Buddhism, or with Buddhism in general, or with Dogen, or like the traditions of, Buddhism. And what are they looking for? What's the point? When they say the goal is to end all suffering, what do they mean by suffering? How do they meditate? What are they meditating about? All of that is covered in this book. It's so simple. When I read it, I was amazed how this book is not more well known, because it's just full of key moments, key definitions, important things. It's ultimately about how to attain non-duality. That's what it is. The notion that subject and object are two different elements of reality, or two different positions of reality, and in reality they're not. They're actually not. You can just understand them both as just one stream, and this is more or less the background of that. I mean, it's way longer, it's super complicated, blah blah blah, but the core concepts are not really difficult to grasp. Everybody can get them. They're very nicely summarized here. So if you ever wondered about Buddhism or meditation, or what the hell do they mean by freedom, suffering, karma, and so on, well, this is it. Like, this is a very nice introduction to it. Highly recommended. It's probably the most recommended, or one of the most recommended books. Beautiful one. Next up, my sister gave me this one. It's in Spanish, El Kybalión, which you probably heard about it, I guess. And if not, it's a very well-known, like, esoteric book. Which I was amazed about it, because it basically goes through the same principles as the other ones. Like, once you get into the vibe of spirituality and like this important or traditional books, they all tell the same. There's oneness, and then there's condensations of that oneness. And this book goes about kind of an old philosophy mode of rationalizing into explaining what lies beyond the metaphysical realm. So what is the absolute? How can we understand the absolute? And so on and so forth. It's okay. It didn't blow my mind. And if you've ever had any kind of experience with these topics, it will probably not say anything that you have not experienced yourself or deduced by yourself. But if you have not had any kind of those experiences, this might be a good introduction to it. Kabbalah, Magical Primer by John Bonner. It's good. The only issue is I read so much about Kabbalah. When I was in my early 20s, I devoured everything that had to do with Kabbalah. I devoured Fortune's Kabbalah. I devoured, all the interpretations of the mystics and traditions, and a lot of, basic theosophy and how it connects with the Kabbalah, and then the Kabbalah itself. And I got into, at some moment, I tried to properly learn how to do Kabbalah, like written Kabbalah, Gematria and all that. And it's okay. I know my way around Kabbalah, so there's nothing new in here. Nothing that I would say, oh my God, this was completely new. But if you know a little bit of your way around Kabbalah, but you're not really sure what the hell it's all about, this is a nice summary. At moments, it goes too much in depth in things that I think are kind of superficial to the whole point. In case you have no idea what I'm talking about, Kabbalah is a system of thought, kind of like a primordial philosophy, or original philosophy, we could say, in which reality can be mapped around a symbol, which is the tree of life. Right? Let me know if you can see it. Here it is. That's the tree of life. So the whole point is that like I was saying, every tradition goes about the same, but this is the absolute, this is the infinity, and then it goes and gets more and more dense until it gets to the kingdom, Malchut. I'm very familiar with this. I wrote a play called Malchut, which is based around this scheme, and it was all about this sphere. So every sphere is a different condensation or process or becoming of this absolute. So the absolute, or at least there's an absolute over here, and this is like the further we can see, but it's organized in different ways. There's supposed to be like a gap, a void in here, and this is the void of the understanding. So this is what you can actually grasp from our limited separate self mind point of view, and then this is what lies beyond that, and there's more but we can't access, and so on and so forth. It's nice. I like it. As I was saying, the only thing is sometimes it goes in depth about some things that are like, I don't know, man. These kinds of things. Like, how can we understand the veils and the diagrams and the colors of the different spheres? And I don't know. It's okay. I like some of it, but it's not a read that I was saying, man, this is the book to read. I think for a general overview, Dion Fortune's The Kabbalah, Mystic Kabbalah by Dion Fortune is better than this one, but at least it's a nice attempt. It's okay. The one thing that I like is that it's not hard to connect this with Tarot. I mean, Tarot is basically Kabbalah applied with cards. Kind of. So it goes in a similar vein. Okay, nice. Personality Types by Richard Riso. This is about the Enneagram. So I was telling you recently that for a while I was very into Kabbalah and traditions of, consciousness and so on and so forth. So I was very into the Fourth Way. If you have never heard about the Fourth Way, it's a school of thought or a mystical school of sorts. It's you always gotta say all of this with a pinch of salt because the technicalities are difficult. But it was a school of self-knowing or self-abidance or self-awareness organized by or directed by George Ivanov Gurdjieff, and also his sidekick, who would say Piotr Uspensky. And P.D. Uspensky, probably my favorite Fourth Way author. They go on long rants. They have different books about it. But there's one symbol that emerged in the knowing of Gurdjieff, which was the Enneagram, which is this symbol, the symbol that's on the cover over here. And this symbol, what it does is every number on the symbol represents a personality. It's basically it. It's like a personality test, if you want to just cheapen it very much, but that's what it is. And every personality has different aspects. The funny or the interesting thing is that it's not a fixed or stable system. Every personality moves around. So you're one number, but when you get stressed, you move to another number, or when you're secure or you're happy, you move to another number. So the diagram is actually a movable diagram. So it's never a fixed thing. You're never one thing for the rest of your life. I mean, you have one core number. I know I have one core number. I have one core personality. But when I'm stressed, when I'm sad, or when I'm depressed, I do certain things that I don't do when I am actually happy or just enjoying my time. So the Enneagram, what it does is explains to you why the hell you do the things you do when you're stressed and why you behave the way you behave when you're secure. It's so helpful. It really helped me to understand and make peace with a lot of things that I thought were wrong with me. And I recommended this book to a friend of mine. She was so sad. She was in therapy, not understanding how was she able to deal with a few things that she was going through and trying to grasp like what's wrong with me. I'm so broken inside. And I said, I lended her my book, this copy, and I was like, you should probably read this. It will help you. It's a nice book. And she read it. She was like, oh man, thank you so much. Now I realize I'm not broken. This is just how I am. And there's more people like me. I'm not alone in my feelings. And it's such a comforting thing. We take for granted how much we need company. But just this kind of thing is very, very important. So I read this one in conjunction with the other book on Enneagram because I was appointed to teach a workshop on Enneagram in a university in Berlin. I knew about the Enneagram years ago and I was very familiar with it, but I have never actually given a workshop about it. So I had to revamp my Enneagram knowledge and just go for it. And that's what I did. And it's great. Like if you can read both these books, you'll get the whole perspective. The only thing that I don't like about this book is that it uses examples from literary characters, and it's mostly just North American books that I have never read, or North American movies or North American theater plays that I truly have never read and I don't care about. If you're from the US, you will love this book because it talks about your culture, but it's not my culture. It feels so alien to me. So when it talks about some US author and how, this character is portrayed in this way, I don't know the play, I don't know the characters, I don't know the conflict, I don't know anything, and just by the description it does nothing to me. So I basically read the descriptions of the personalities, and most of this character looks like this, or look at how this character behaves, this can be mapped out into this number. I just skimmed those through because it made no sense to me. But for the content, it's worth, though. This is my favorite. So you can read both to get a complete picture, great, but this is the one who's recommended. More books about self-development or spirituality, but these are actually about card divination. So I bought two ones. The covers are terrible. Like I don't know what's up with card divinations and design, but God, the design is awful. I'm so sorry to be mean, but what the hell? This is the Essential Lenormand by Rana George. This is if you ever want to read Lenormand, which is there's a lot of card systems for card reading and divination and so on. So Tarot is one of them. Lenormand is another one. Lenormand is probably my favorite divination system. So Tarot is more for self-knowledge, reflection, sharing nice conversations with your friend or whoever you're reading into. But Lenormand is divination. Like, what do you want to know? Oh, I want to know if this will happen. Yes, and this and this and this. It's like a very direct card divination system. I recommend it if that's your thing. It was my thing. I really like Lenormand, and this book helped me to get a better grasp of the system. By the same token, after Lenormand, I got into Kippa cards. Now, Kippa-Karten, or Kipper cards, are another divination system very similar to Lenormand, but from Bavaria. So it's very hard to get into it because the cards are hard to find. I had to scout through the internet. I finally found one on Amazon, like a pack of cards. It took me so long to find it. There's some other one in thrift stores around the US, but they're not as common. If you're in Germany, it's really easy to find, I guess. So I went to google.de and I found it really easily. But in here in the US, it's not common and it's difficult to get by. But I found my cards and I found this book because I really wanted to read Kipper, but there's no websites, there's no resources, there's nothing. So this one, The Art of Kipper by Alexander Mosruk. And it's okay. It's okay. Like, I read it through and it makes sense, but I think sometimes it's a little bit too specific about what the cards mean and what they do in conjunction with one another. And sometimes I've discovered through my interpretations and my work that some of the meanings need to be a little bit looser. You need to have less boundaries in between them. They're more fluid. It's not like one thing means something completely different, but it's not like A and B, when they're together, they mean this only one thing. Sometimes conceptual blending can be more complicated. It's not like they're closed symbols. Cards are open symbols. Even though in Kippa and Lenormand the symbols are more constrained, it's not like Tarot. In Tarot, for example, you get a card and you get like death. So death means change. It means closing of episodes. It means moving from one thing to another. But it's also the mourning that involves a situation or everything that surrounds death, right? But in Kippa or in Lenormand, the coffin, for example, does the same operation like death. It means ending cycles. That's it. It's ending. And it's a painful ending, but it's an ending. That's it. There's not much more to read into it. So when you're getting cards and you get one card in conjunction with coffin, it's like this thing will end. That's it. It's called a stop card because it stops your reading. If you get dog, which means friend, and you get dog and coffin, like the friendship will end. That's it. Like it's very direct. I really like card divinations. I got into it last year and I've been going through my process of finding what kind of cards do I like and how do I like to read them, and it's been a nice journey. So highly recommend it. All right, we're getting into the political section. Let me bring this over here. This is Reason and Revolution by Marcuse. So I read this because I have never read Marcuse before. And I really wanted to read this one because it's around Hegel. So it's Hegel and the Rise of Social Theory. I mean, how can you resist that? Hegel's my guy. And it's, how long is this? Like 420 pages of analysis of Hegel and then Marx and then going into Feuerbach and Kant and reconnecting it and so on and so forth. I liked it. It was funny to me because I started reading it and somebody had started too, and the person who started it got until page 26. Now here it is marked 26, and then that person just gave up, and I kept going, and I said, okay, I'm gonna keep going until I get tired, and I got tired around, when it started talking about authors that I don't know, Saint-Simon, the specifics about Stahl or Lawrence von Stein, or neo-idealist British authors, which I have never read and I have zero intentions of reading. Fascist Hegelianism, that was kind of interesting but messed up. He first goes through an overview of Hegel from his perspective, the phenomenology of spirit, the science of logic, the philosophy of right, and the encyclopedia, all of it, the lectures on the history of philosophy. And yeah, if you have never read Hegel, this is one big punch of all the information. Sometimes it's a little bit too dense if you don't know what he's talking about, or if you're not really familiar with the philosophical tradition, which Marcuse is, drawing from. But it's such a nice book. It's a very nice summary of Hegel. If you have read your way around Hegel and you're missing the guy, like I do sometimes, I miss my Hegel. Definitely recommend it. This was a very nice read. At sometimes it's a little bit long and tedious, but other times it gets the pace, and man, good, very good, Marcuse. This is interesting. This is Democracy and Other Neoliberal Fantasies by Jolie Dean. Is the cover. I bought it used, so I don't know how the cover actually looks like, but I liked it. It's okay. It didn't leave a big impression on me. It's very from the 90s, I would say, and that's interesting because some things feel outdated. It goes so much about George Bush, 9/11, and so on and so forth, that now seems, I understand it, but it seems so outdated, the kind of analysis that the author does. At moments, it's very spot on, and at moments, I'm like, we kind of moved to another way of understanding this issue, so it's okay. The big point that the book is trying to make is the conflict between the representation of democracy and actual democracy, and how under neoliberalism democracy cannot happen through different technologies, how the dot-com bubble and the internet propose to have a more democratic society, but in reality the way in which internet was appropriated by brands and millionaires actually destroyed the possibility of democracy. It's right on the moment where Facebook was catching on. So it's prophesizing that Facebook will actually lead to less democracy, which is funny because later on we had the hearings of Facebook and Twitter and whatnot. So this book is hinting what will later on be known as the conflict or the problem of social media. So it's interesting. It's like a piece of history, but it's a nice analysis. So if you have never read about any of these topics, this might be a good read. But a better book on that regard that I think I really like it is this one, The Never-Ending Nightmare. And oh man, it's so good. The authors are Pierre Dardot and Christian Laval, and it's great. It's terrifying. It's terrible. It's the worst thing because it'll remind you that there's no way out of the system, and the system is just nightmarish. It's just a big old nightmare, and there's no way out, and you're trapped in this thing. And any attempt that you do to escape from it, it just deepens the rabbit hole. It is a sad read, it is a terrible read, but at the same time it's a very realistic read. Great, it's great. If you can find it, I'm sure you can find it, because it's, how old is this? This is not old at all. It's 2019, man. Like just go and get it. Go and get this one. Like, please go and get this book. It's so good. It's so good. It's so clear. It tells you everything just how it is. Man, highly recommend it. As a political book, as an analysis of current society, just The Never-Ending Nightmare really does what it proposes. Super fun to read too. It destroys the European Union so much. It rants on and on about how the European Union is a flawed project and who's actually benefiting from the European Union project and what it's actually doing, the political interest behind it, the economical interest behind it, everything. It just goes on and on about it. And as a non-European, at some moments I was like, okay, I get it, it sucks, let's go. But aside from that, um, he has a lot of quotable and moments and bits and pieces that will let you, thinking. There's some nice reflections about it, about financiation, politics, and the excuses of power, capitalism, neoliberal societies, the economico-juridical complex that neo-capitalism is, the issues of the left, which I thought was such a beautiful analysis, like the real problem of the left. What is the left nowadays? So good. It goes more than anything about the issue of the administrators of the system, which is something I've mentioned, I've seen in other books, but in here is very well articulated. The idea that the neoliberal system places in power figures that are administrators of the system, and those administrators stand in front of the people saying they're left wing. This you can see here in the U.S. this all the time. Like there's no real left in the U.S., but people say, "Oh, the socialists, the left wing media," and it's just right wing. There's no left in here. But these right wingers who support the neoliberal system and support capitalism call themselves the left, and that differential between actually being the left and calling yourself the left while enacting right wing politics is what propels, the excess of extreme right-wing propaganda and extreme right-wing votings that has been happening. The reason why you have crisis in South America, in Chile, in Argentina, everybody's voting for the extreme right-wing, the fascist right-wing, the guys who say, we're gonna destroy the state, the liberal, the anarcho-capitalist fascism, or the anarcho-capitalist side of politics, basically people who don't understand economy. Those people are reacting against the left, which is actually just a complicit right wing who supports, the oligarchy and the powers be and the millionaires and the billionaires of the world and the big financial system. Those people who are supporting those big financial systems at the expense of everybody else call themselves the left, and that's what produces this feeling of, oh, if we want them out, we need to call the extreme right because they'll kick them out. That will show them. So people vote against their own interests because they're desperate. We all want to change. This is a nightmare. We want to change this. And if the system proposes you somebody who'll do the same thing for 30 years and it's still screwing you up, or somebody new who'll just blow up everything and you don't know if things will change or not, but if things will get better or not, but at least they will change, most people vote for the big one change. And that big one change tends to be supported by the same people who are also supporting the other party. The never-ending nightmare, man. Go and get it. Beautiful book. Wild Materialism. I like the idea. The Ethic of Terror and the Modern Republic. It was supposed to be an analysis on terrorism and political concepts, and it is, but it's so long and it's just not really interesting. I didn't connect with it. It's written in a very convoluted way. Some things that should be simple are stated in such a complex, unnecessarily complex way, with so many references and just trying so hard to be like exact and academic, and I got bored. I think I finished it. Yeah, I finished it, but I don't remember much of it. Like from half the book onwards, I was just like, just make it stop. Just make it stop. It has very nice moments, but it's definitely not on my top books this year. This is one book that I promised myself that I would read one day, and this year I was like, okay, you know what? Screw it. I'm gonna read the Grundrisse. And I did. I finished it cover to cover, all of it. You can see. I promise you, there's like you see, there's highlights all around the book, everywhere. At different moments, you can see my highlighting. So I read it cover to cover, every single word. It's okay. It's, you know what? If you have ever read Capital, I mean, if you haven't, go and read Capital. But if you have never read Capital, or you have no idea what Capital is about, this is like a pre-Capital, so to say. All the main ideas of Capital are here, but scattered around. It's a very scattered text, and you can tell it's constructed from a bunch of different texts by Marx. So Marx actually wrote just Capital. All the other texts are little pamphlets, like the Communist Manifesto, which is just a manifesto. It's a little pamphlet that was written. It's not the basis of Marxism. Marxism is Capital. It's a political, economical analysis. It's an economical analysis of reality using Adam Smith and using Sismondi and using Ricardo. It's basically economics. That's what it is. So this is economics. It's a tome of economics. And like actual economics. It's funny because uh, you would say, oh man, I just want to read political theory and what does it mean, and oh, when's the revolution coming? And then Marx hits you with the real thing. You want to learn how it works? Well, you gotta learn economics, man. There's no way around it. So Marx does what Marx does best and just kicks you in the face with a lot of information. It's good, but if you've read Capital, you're not missing anything. And if you have never read Capital, I will recommend you to read Capital instead of this. If you don't think Capital is for you because it might be too long, then you can definitely read an abridged version of Capital, and it'll be better than this. This is only if you have already read Capital and you're familiar with Marx and you want to deepen your understanding of where the hell Marx got his ideas from or what was he thinking about. Sure, this is the book. But otherwise, I would just not really go into this one. I have two books about feminism, which are very nice, but they're in Spanish. So this is called Históricas, Movimientos Feministas de Mujeres en Chile en 1850 al 2020. So feminist movements from 1850 to 2020. It's so well done, it's so well researched, it's so nice. Like, I highly, highly recommend this one. It's beautiful, it's so simple, it's very direct, there's no and moments a little bit of a fussy language, but in general it's very direct, very clear. It tells you what's happening, what are the feminists demanding, what have been the difficulties of the feminist movement in Chile. So you have a lot of just notable researchers in Spanish. Ana Galvez Comandini, which is the coordinator of the whole project, Hilary Heiner, María Estela Toro, Ana López, Carelia Cerda, Karen Alfaro, Panchiva Barrientos, Gina Nostroza. It's just notable researchers and their understanding of the situation. It goes about the Mapuche identity, it goes about feminism, it goes about motherhood, which is the topic that I'm most connected with. It's just great, and it goes by years and makes you really understand, like, how did the feminist movements and the left were connected, and when did they disconnected, when was the left aligning with the patriarchal mode of understanding instead of the feminist mode. It's so well done, it's very well researched, highly recommended. This is another book on that regard. It's called Mujeres, Espejos y Fragmentos, and it's an anthology of text about feminism and but more than anything about motherhood, I would say. It goes in depth about biology, birth, care, politics, the development of the understanding of what a mother is, how do mothers self identify, or what the hell is motherhood? How can we understand motherhood as a process and not as a thing, not as a one fixed thing? It's great. I can highly recommend it. If you're looking for a feminist literature book about essays in Spanish, this one will be my choice for now. Next up, theory in general. This is Daniel Casani, Metáforas Sospechosas. I bought this book in Spain because I thought the title was about metaphor. And it is, but it's not about metaphors really. Like, it's just in the title. It's a book about how to write in Spanish. So it's just a series of talks, just 2 talks, I think. I don't remember. I guess it's 2 or 3 talks. In which the author goes about how to write, how can we reach an interesting argument, how can we actually develop our thinking through writing. I like it, but it's basically the same thing that I teach in my writing class at Columbia, so nothing actually new here. It's okay. If you want to get a book about how to write, I think this might be up your alley. It's very simple. You might read this and say, oh, I get the advices, but I don't know if they're really useful. Yes, they are. These are the only advices you'll probably need. Anything on top of this, it's a nice ribbon on top, but this is the core. Next up, this one was a book that took me a long time to read. So I took it to Europe during my vacations, and I read it on trains, I read it in Berlin, I read it in Spain, I read it all around Europe, and I came back and I kept reading and I kept reading it. It took me a while. Not because it's not interesting, but because it's written in a very slow style. So it's called The Philosophy of Symbolic Forms, and it's volume 2 on mythical thought, because I like myth theory and metaphor theory. So it's by Ernst Cassirer, and it's really good. It's really good. It explains to you what the hell is myth theory and mythical thinking, and it's great. It connects... It's such a nice exercise of connecting really different avenues of thinking and really different points, and and then just making one cohesive argument. He connects like Zen Buddhism and Greek philosophy and Christianity, and it finds the elements and paganism and witchcraft and all of those things, shamanism, are connected with mythical thinking, and how this mythical thinking operates, new age philosophy, numerology, all of that is all connected here from a very serious philosophical point of view. This is not mumbo jumbo. They're like, this guy is talking serious. So you better take it seriously. It's a great book. Like I thought I was, at some point I was afraid that I was not going to be able to finish it, because at moments I was like, please just move on. I get the point, just move on. But he just really wants to make sure you get it. So he hammers a little bit too long some of his points, but overall pretty good. Well, this is a classic. This is an absolute classic. It's The Hero of a Thousand Faces by Joseph Campbell. If you have never read this, I think it's time for you to read it. I think it's time for you to stop reading, small excerpts or descriptions of the book online and actually do yourself a favor and read it. I read it. I read it years ago, but I forgot most of it. And I was like, I wonder how much it holds up now. And it really does hold up. And it's impressively connected with all the books about Zen Buddhism, spirituality, and whatnot. It's the same argument. Everything goes to the same place. It's just the understanding of the dissolution of the self into the absolute and the non-duality of the self. It's very well explained here. It's the hero that goes out of, his comfortable everyday life and gets into the dark cave where the dragon lies. But before getting into the cave, he refuses to call to adventure, but then the stakes are too high, so he goes into adventure. He meets a guide to the underworld. He has to cross the threshold, loses part of his humanity on the way there, then gets into the underworld. In the underworld, faces the shadows of his own selfhood, then has to fight the dragon with the metaphorical weapon, and then slay the dragon, but at the same time discover that he himself is the own dragon, so kill the enemy, but kill his own self, and then make peace with it, and then rediscover himself, die, be reborn, come back to from the underworld into the everyday life, go back to the town, go back to home. But now that he's home, it's a different hero. It's no longer the same hero that left the journey. He's now been transformed by the experience. All of that is the hero journey. It's summarized brutally by me right now, but it's explained in detail here. But what matters is it's a structure of understanding cyclical process of selfhood, or it's a mode of seeing how changes in the self entail changes of consciousness. It's not just changing in general. It's a deep way of understanding how change is connected to self-consciousness and to spirituality. It's such a beautiful book. It has a lot of nice passages. It's so condensed, and it's of course connects with the Bardo and the Book of the Dead, because everything is basically the same. Just look at this. Those who know that what they and all things really are is the everlasting. They listen everywhere to the unheard music of the eternal concord. Man, just read it. Just absolutely read this. It's a gem. If you have never read it, or if you read it years ago and you don't remember much, it's time to reread, man. It's time. Quentin Milasaux, After Finitude. I read this book because I read Milasaux's Time Without Becoming years ago, and I didn't really like it, but I was told that Time Without Becoming was the real deal, so I read it, and it's okay. I like it. I like Milasaux. I disagree with him in principle. It's very against most of my understanding, but at the same time, if I follow his thinking through, I can actually get what he's saying. So for him, correlation is the idea that in the end, everything is correlated to self-consciousness. So there's a self-consciousness that experiences the world, and the world does A, B, or C. But everything, in the end, is correlated with consciousness. So he asked, can we find a model of the world and the understanding that is not related to the mind, that is not related to consciousness? There's no correlation there. Can we actually find an ontology from just the objects in the world? And how would that be? How would mathematics look from the perspective of objects? As a thinking exercise, A+. Great, I like it. As some conclusions, I don't quite agree. It's very un-Hegelian, that's why. But in some strange way, it's connected to all of this that I've been talking about. He proposes the idea of a mathematical world which ultimately has no meaning, because the world has no meaning, but also it has no contingent, specific, fixed rules that will forever be the same. So even though it seems like the world is stable and constant, Melasson argues that there's no reason to think that that's the case. The world can be can change completely tomorrow, and all the rules of physics can change. There's nothing to tell you otherwise. We are only accustomed to our set of rules because are the rules that we've experienced in this moment where we're alive and our historical record, but the universe is too long and too complex to actually summarize that as the only possibility. We have a bias of existing. So what about non-existence? It's very good. I don't agree with the author, but if you can stomach reading somebody that you disagree with, which I try to do that as much as I can, I don't agree with Melasson, but it's important to engage with books that you don't agree with so you can get something out of it. So, yep. If you're looking for a book by Melasson, I will recommend this one over Time Without Becoming, because this is more, it has more oomph to it. I think it's cool. Here it is. Bruno Latour. Bruno Latour says, you may entirely disagree with the author's solution. I do too. But not with the courage with which he proposes to escape from the prison of discourse and to put the much abused metaphor of the Copernican revolution right at last. How can you resist such a description? Go and read it. It's good. Yukhai on the existence of digital objects. I bought this book because I wanted to. I just finished teaching a class on memes at Columbia. I'll tell you about it at some point. But I taught a class on memes. So I talked about memes, replication, technology, and so on and so forth. So I got into technology, replication, memes. So I thought this would be the book that I was looking for. And it wasn't. I just didn't like it. I read it through, cover to cover, all of it. And I just, nope, not my thing. I've discovered one thing that it's important. So I don't recommend this book. I found it quite repetitive and it didn't give me many insights. It has nice moments, but not enough to actually justify reading it cover to cover. So I read it so you don't have to. Not my thing. But what this book does is that one thing that I really don't like is that it goes in depth and for so long about Heidegger. So Heidegger has a few texts on technology. Probably the most important philosopher on technology from, 40s and 50s. After Husserl, he was the guy. And I don't like Heidegger. I find Heidegger very unproductive, and I find him very boring and very cheesy. That's the problem. I think Heidegger is cheesy. Well, he was a Nazi, for starters. But aside from that, I think he writes in a very cheesy way. In Chile, we have this saying, ciútico. I think Heidegger is ciútico. He's like, I always imagine Heidegger sitting on a leather chair and be like, like a little bit affected and saying things like this. That's how it sounds, Heidegger, to me. I can't take him seriously. He seems so German and like trying to teach you how things are. And Heidegger always starts with the assumption, nobody has ever thought about this, so I will explore it for the first time in humanity. And you're like, no, you're not. What are you talking about? I don't know. I don't like Heidegger. I think Heidegger is basically fan fiction of Hegel. Just poorly written and not very insightful. But there's people who love Heidegger. Like this author really loves Heidegger, which might be the reason why I didn't connect with the book, because I found it, most of the insights that had nothing to do with Heidegger, I found it the most interesting. But whenever the author went into Heidegger, I thought it was just wasting my time, because the arguments are very like, the non-being of being is the being of the non-being in being. And you're like, I guess so, bro. But like, what do you mean? Can you just state it directly so I don't have to make this puzzling pieces together so I can try to grasp your argument? I don't like it. And this one, Techniques and Time by Bernard Stiegler. It's kind of on the same vein, but it's better written. It has so much Heidegger in it. It was driving me crazy. At some point, I just wanted to stop reading because I really don't like Heidegger. And this book really likes Heidegger. So again, whenever Heidegger appears in Dasein, man, they love Dasein. Dasein is Heidegger's biggest concept, which appears in Time and Being. And it's just Dasein here, Dasein that. We can understand Dasein as blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I don't care, bro. That's the truth. I don't care what the sign is. I truly, truly don't care. But what matters is, on this book, he of course goes about the sign here, the sign that, blah, blah, blah. But it's not only that. This book in particular, which really got my attention, was the question of what's the relationship between techniques and time, or technology and time. These are two things that I've never thought were connected, and this author connects them just beautifully. At moments with too much Heidegger, and at moments with a little bit too much trying to put authors and place them in connection. And I'm not really into reading complicated text and feel like I'm getting smarter by reading complicated text. Usually when the text gets too complicated, I feel like I'm getting dumber. So I don't want to feel even more dumber than I am, but at moments I was like, come on, man, just say it. Just say what you want to say. Just stop teasing me. Say what you want to say. One thing that this book does a lot, and I don't like, is when authors place rhetorical questions like, but what does it mean, blah, 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 blah? Are we able to understand blah, 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 blah from the blah, 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 blah point of view? Or is it that blah, 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 blah is actually blah, 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 blah? Well, it's possible to think the blah, 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 but is it blah, 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 blah? And then they move to the next chapter. You're like, okay, but what is the answer? What are you doing? I know that the questions are supposed to guide the research, but man, you don't need to post like a page full of questions and then move on. I don't know. I'm just ranting a little bit, but aside from those moments, I truly like this book. It was nice. I had a few conversations with one of my advisors who just read these 3 tomes. I just read the first one. It's volume 1, 2, and 3. This is The Fault of Epimetheus, which is the first book, and it's so nice. The myth of Epimetheus as the one who forgets. Epimetheus is the brother of Prometheus, and Prometheus is the one who gave man the fire, gave man technology, and Epimetheus is the one who forgets. He's a clumsy, stupid, big being that keeps forgetting. And the argument in here is that technology and culture are somehow related between technology and the forgetting of it. The argument is very nuanced. It's very long. I'm not going to reiterate it here. It makes no sense to just do that. But it's a nice read. Like if you're thinking about reading something about technology, I think this is the book you're looking for. It's at moments it's difficult to read, but in general it's very clear. So recommended. Other books that I've read that have to do with narrative more than anything. This one, it was a strange find. I was looking at a TikTok or Instagram stories, I don't remember, but Reels, I don't know. But somewhere, someone went to a used bookstore in some old town, and they made they were filming the store, and in between the shelves there was this book, and it really got my attention. The cover got my attention. It's this cover, and the book is called Communion. I know there's a movie about this, but I've never seen the movie. I never watched it. I have no idea, but the book is really good, by Whitley Strieber. It's a description of the author and his experience being abducted by aliens. So if this is a triggering topic, maybe it's not your book. To me, alien abduction is by far the most terrifying subgenre. By far. There's nothing more terrifying than an alien abduction. Ghosts are okay, they're kind of creepy. Demons do nothing for me. Like I don't really care. Any kind of supernatural thing, I don't believe in the supernatural. Like I don't really care. But aliens, man, aliens are right in that space close to fairies. Fairies and aliens are very terrifying to me because they're so prevalent in folk culture, and there've been stories of UFOs and dark fairies for so long, and at some moment fairies and UFOs are kind of mixed together. If you ever played role-playing games, if you know your way around World of Darkness, there's a game called Changeling the Lost, which is about fairies, but the fairies behave like UFOs, and there's some fairy races that are basically aliens. It's very well written, and it takes you on a journey through abuse. It's about being abducted, being abused, being mentally abused by your memories, your life, and then the author just peels every layer of his experience like an onion and takes you on this journey, which is very intense, deeply terrifying, but very, very interesting. So if you're looking for a terrifying read and a book that will get you like, oh wow, and then what happened? Oh wow, and then what happened? This is the book you're looking for. Sylvie by Gerald de Nerval. I bought this book so many years ago, in 2004, and I lended it to the girlfriend that I had at the time, and then we broke up, and then I never saw the book again, and I couldn't read it, and I wanted to buy it because I knew that it was Umberto Eco's favorite book. So I said, okay, I have to read it at some point. I really want to read it. So I did, and it's nice. It's a very nice book. Not my favorite book by any stretch of the imagination. It's just a nice book. It's a nice story. It's a story about memory, basically. The little lives of characters in a little town and how they connect and the lives they live and how they go back to the town where they grew up and how old they are. It's like this, it's the reverse of a coming of age. It's like a coming of old age kind of book, making peace with time, making peace with memory, or inhabiting memory in different ways. Very nice. It's a very calm, dream-like experience. I don't know if it's in English. I guess so. I've never found it in English. I can only find it in Spanish. Sylvie. Very nice. Beautiful. Beautiful book. Roberto Bolaño. I bought this one, Estrella Distante. Somebody recommended me this book. It's about a group of poets who had a workshop of poetry taught by a professor, a teacher, and one of the people in the group is actually a Nazi, and is actually part of the military dictatorship. And this guy is just, you know, starting to kill everybody on the workshop, and it's a deeply terrifying book. Very anchored in what actually happened in the dictatorship. Roberto Bolaño lived through the dictatorship. He was exiled and he left. He lived in Mexico. He lived in Spain, and he made his life outside of Chile. And the book reflects that. It's a book that kind of follows Bolaño around, I would say, and his experience with the dictatorship and the fear that it entails, and moving out, trying to forget the past, but then having to come to terms with it and face your fears and the characters from the past. It's nice. Not my favorite, but it's nice. It's a nice read, and I read it in like a day. It's not long, 157 pages with a very big, font. So nice. If you're looking for a Bolaño, this might be it, but it's not. Because the favorite book of the year goes to this one, 2666 by Bolaño. This mammoth, this monstrosity of a book. How long is this? I'll tell you right away. This book is 1,180 pages. And I read it in a month, I would say, a little bit less than a month. I just started reading it and I couldn't stop. It was just so good. I bought it in Spain, in La Central. I found it there, and I like this edition because I've always seen this book like in big versions, and they're too big. I can't carry them around. But this edition was very nice, and it seems kind of pocket size, so I carry it with me for days. Like I took it on trips. This came with me to Europe, so I read it around Europe. And it's basically 5 books into one. And it tells the story of a series of murders that are happening in a small town in Santa Teresa. It's a made-up city that Bolaño created, where there's like workers. It's a Mexican town with a lot of poor people and a very, run-down economy, and it's a very desert-like place. And the little stories and how they connect to Santa Teresa. That's the book. My favorite, it's 5 books. One is the most dynamic one. When you start reading, oh my God, you're plunged into the action. A bunch of academics and critics and doing things and reading books and reinterpreting, falling in love, hating each other, having sex, breaking up, making stories, adventures. It's going on rampages, taking planes to different places. It's very fast-paced. Then the second book, it's more calm. It's just following one person, and it goes. The second one is my favorite. It's so beautiful. I'm not going to spoil anything or tell you what it's about. But the second book is more like a calm situation. Then the third one is even more calmer. It's like a very specific thing related to the book, but just one character and just following that character. The fourth book is like, the fourth book is basically like this much. It's so huge. It's a big chunk of the book. And it's just, oh, unbearably difficult to read because it's just descriptions of murders for pages and pages and pages. And at some point, the exercise that Bolaño is doing is so well done. When the fifth book is another book. It's connected to, everything is somehow connected, but never explicitly connected. It has like a feeling of being connected. That's the core of it. But Bolaño manages time in such a way that it's impossible not to fall in love with how the book is written. It takes you on a journey that only a novel can take you. Like mentioning and describing murders for 500 pages or so. It's tedious and it's terrible, but at some moment you become desensitized to the murders and everything starts blending. One murder blends with the other one and the cops are trying to find solutions, but they don't remember things and you don't remember things because the murders have been described for so many pages and everything is like one big murder. And everything is so dark, so abusive, it's terrible, the police is terrible, the murders are terrible, there's no good guys, there's no hope, it's so grim, but at the same time there's glimmers of hope and love and little short stories that happen in between the characters and they fall in love, something else happens and you get like glimmers of hope and beauty and then things wither and then grow up again. It's beautiful, it's beautiful. It's not one cohesive novel with characters that move around. I'm not really into novels, I think, in the sense of following one character and, oh, what's going to happen next? I don't get that feeling. I don't get the what's going to happen next feeling with narrative or with novels. I get that with philosophy. Like, oh, where's the concept going next? I get that with philosophy, but I don't get that with narrative. But this book doesn't really care, I mean, except on part 1 and parts of part 2, what's gonna happen, but it's more like an exercise of how it's written, the topic it goes through, how it explains things. It's so good. So, summarize the 3 tops of the year. First one, Bolaño, 2666. Read it, treasure it. Probably the best book you will read. Definitely my favorite book of the year, by far. This is such a gem. I don't think I'll ever read such a beautiful novel. And it's sad because it's a novel that's right on my alley and it was the last of Bolaño's novel. He wrote this, he died before, he finished it, but he never actually edited the book. That's why he wanted to publish it as 5 different books and the editor said, no, we're gonna make it 1 and we're gonna sell it. And then he died and it was published afterwards. And it's so sad that it's the last one because this is just a gem. It's beautiful. Number 1. Number 2, Neverending Nightmare. Please, if you're looking for any kind of political theory, this book, it's a gem. It's beautiful, it's not written in complicated terms, and it really tells you how things are in the world and why are people voting the way they're voting. And 3, The Hero of a Thousand Faces by Joseph Campbell. Beautiful book. Basically, it's a way of summarizing all the books about spirituality and mythical thinking and, religion and so on. It's just a condensation of all the information into one monomyth. You can agree or disagree with whatever takes he has. Not much to disagree. He's very fair in all his assessments, but man, this one. As you can tell, these are not very difficult books. They're very friendly to read and they're amazing. So if you're gonna read 3 books next year, let me recommend you these 3. So yeah, I hope you will like the summary of the books that I read this year. This is everything I read. I read some other books that I didn't finish them. So that was the new rule that I applied to myself. I'm not going to talk about books that I haven't finished. So as soon as I finish one book, I put it on a pile and I wait until I can do the summary of the books for the year. So I can finally put this back on the shelf and start going for the next one. I hope you're doing well. I hope you enjoyed this video and let me know what you're reading. If you have any recommendations, what was your favorite book this year? Alright, take care. I'll see you pretty soon. Bye guys.